A modestly dressed woman walks into a luxury store and is treated like a beggar. They mock her. They shove her out the door, under the cold stares of everyone watching. But just a few hours later, that same woman returns, not to shop, but to buy out the parent company and slam shut the door of discrimination on those who once looked down on her. This isn't just an act of revenge. This is a revolution, redefining what true power means, what justice means. And it begins right now. Please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to update our latest videos. That morning, the sky over New York was an unusual shade of grey, as if it too sensed that something was about to happen. On Fifth Avenue, home to the world's most luxurious and extravagant brands, each passing car moved like a silent declaration of success. The grand glass windows shimmered under the city lights, and the footsteps of the elite echoed on the cold marble, the sound of privilege. Amara Wells stood before the entrance of Celestia Luxe, a store dubbed the sanctuary of ultra-premium cosmetics for the elite. She wore a beige wool coat, minimalist dark jeans, and matte leather shoes without a logo, understated, but every detail radiated the quiet elegance of a woman who knew her own worth. And that alone made her stand out from the crowd, not because she tried to be seen, but because she never needed to try. The glass doors slid open, a rush of fragrance from hundreds of expensive perfumes swept over her, blending with the soft strains of classical music drifting from hidden ceiling speakers. No one greeted her. No one looked up. No one smiled. A receptionist bowed politely, but only to send off a blonde customer in a Chanel coat, not to welcome Amara. Amara smiled faintly. She wasn't surprised. She had grown used to this kind of selective hospitality in the world of high-end retail. But today she wasn't here to be acknowledged. She was here to buy something for the evening gala, a charity event she herself was hosting. She walked straight to the display of the newly released Lumiere Elixir line, a legendary collection limited to just 100 sets worldwide, each priced at nearly $20,000. Her fingers gently skimmed the crystal-encased serums, her eyes calmly studying the ingredients like a true skincare expert. A moment of peace, but peace sometimes is just the quiet before a storm. Amara leaned in to closely examine a shimmering serum bottle, her eyes focused on the ingredient list etched into the glass, the kind of detail only someone truly knowledgeable about skincare would care to read. At that moment, a cold voice cut through the air behind her. These items aren't usually meant for people who just come to look. Amara looked up. Standing before her was Stephen Cross, the branch manager of Celestia Luxe. He wore a tailored grey suit, a dark blue tie, and shoes polished so sharply they could reflect light. His expression dripped with condescension, the kind of smirk that lifts just one corner of the mouth. The smirk of someone who fancied himself the gatekeeper to a world he believed Amara did not belong in. Amara remained calm. "I'm looking at the Lumiere Elixir set. I'm very interested in the quality of this line." Stephen stepped closer, positioning himself in front of the display as if to block her off from the elite world he believed he was protecting. He tilted his head, scanning her beige coat without a logo, the unbranded leather shoes, her neatly tied, unstyled hair. Then he spoke again, this time louder, just enough for the 3 nearby staff members to hear. "We don't provide free samples to casual passers-by. If you need to try something, I could refer you to a more affordable brand. Maybe something in Soho." The room froze. A young staff member flinched, then quickly looked down. A customer testing lipstick paused, stealing a glance sideways. Amara looked Stephen directly in the eyes. "I didn't ask for anything. I came here to buy." Stephen shrugged, folding his arms. "In that case, I'll need to see proof of payment capability. This is a limited edition product. Not just anyone can reach for it." That sentence hit the marble floor like a slab of cold, sharp ice. Amara took a deep breath. She had encountered prejudice before, but rarely one this arrogant, this rude, and this public. "I don't need to prove anything to you," she said, her voice steady but firm. "And if that's your store policy, then I'd like to speak to someone with higher authority." Stephen let out a short, cutting laugh. "I am the highest authority here." At that very moment, he turned and gestured toward a security guard near the entrance. Lance Miller, a tall, muscular man in a black suit with a Bluetooth earpiece, immediately stepped forward. "Lance, please escort this guest out. She doesn't match the Celestia Lux experience." No hesitation, no second thought. Lance approached and grabbed Amara by the arm as if she were a shoplifter. The glass doors opened. Passers-by started to look. Eyes turned. Phones were raised. Whispers began. Amara was pushed out onto the street like a criminal. She stumbled, but did not fall. She stood tall, adjusted her sleeve, smoothed her hair. Inside her, a different door had just been opened. A door that Stephen Cross and the arrogant empire behind him would soon have to walk through, but only to bow their heads. Amara stood outside Celestia Lux, amid the bustling crowd of Fifth Avenue. Her simple wool coat fluttered gently in the breeze, and her neatly tied black hair shimmered under the midday sun. Her eyes, though she had just been publicly humiliated, did not waver. No shouting, no sobbing, no begging. Amara Wells simply pulled out her phone. She opened her contacts and selected a name saved plainly as Dominic, then held the phone to her ear. No one inside Celestia Lux, not Stephen Cross, not Lance Miller, not a single staff member, had any idea that the woman they had just ridiculed and shoved out like a worthless object was the wife of Dominic Wells, a tech billionaire, founder of Wells Innovations, and one of the top 10 wealthiest men in the world. The voice on the other end answered instantly, "Amara, are you okay?" Dominic's voice was filled with concern, but beneath it was a sharp edge of alertness, sensing the heavy silence on her end. Amara tightened her grip on the phone, her eyes still locked on the glass door reflecting Stephen Cross inside, arms crossed, watching her like a man who believed he had won. She replied, calm but firm, "Honey, I was just kicked out of Celestia Lux, publicly humiliated, all because I didn't fit their idea of what someone appropriate should look like." A brief silence followed. She heard Dominic inhale deeply, very deeply. "The manager's name is Stephen Cross. The security guard is Lance Miller. I'm fine, but we need to talk about Ascendant Holdings." Dominic didn't ask anything else. He only replied softly, but with unmistakable authority, "I understand. Come home, love. I'll take care of the rest." Amara smiled faintly, a smile as soft as a petal, but her eyes now gleamed like sharpened steel. She ended the call and walked off into the sunlight, her posture serene. Behind her, through the wide glass windows, the man who had scorned her remained unaware that his empire had just begun to shake, and that he himself had lit the very spark that would burn down everything he once held in pride. As the noisy traffic of Fifth Avenue flowed behind her, Amara Wells walked slowly along the wide sidewalk, letting memories rise like deep ocean waves. She remembered where she began. Amara was not born into luxury. She was the daughter of two Haitian immigrants, people who had crossed oceans and prejudice in search of the American dream. Her childhood was made of cramped nights in a two-room apartment in the Bronx, meals soaked in sweat and sacrifice, days when her mother bent over cleaning hotel floors and her father drove taxis through the night to earn a handful of crumpled bills. Amara grew up in a world where nothing was handed to her except an unbreakable will. She learned to read from billboards on the street, learned math from monthly electric bills. She went to public schools, fought tooth and nail for every scholarship, every sliver of opportunity life scattered toward poor kids like her. Not by luck, not by looks, but by intellect, by grit, by never letting herself be defined by someone else's gaze. Amara graduated top of her class from Harvard Business School, with a note from the dean that read, "She's not only the most brilliant student we've had, she's a born leader." And then she met Dominic Wells, not at some lavish high society gala, not at an event staged for the ultra-wealthy. They met at a non-profit seminar supporting small businesses in immigrant communities. Dominic, the cold, brilliant tech billionaire, was captivated by Amara not because of beauty, but by the fire in her eyes, her unwavering will, and the ideals pulsing in her heart. Their love wasn't built on wealth. It was built on alignment, two people who had clawed their way from the bottom to the top, carrying with them a self-respect nothing could shake. Today, as she stood alone after the stain that Celestia Lux had tried to smear on her dignity, Amara didn't feel small. On the contrary, she felt power in every beat of her heart. A power forged from every time she lifted her chin against disdain, every time she fell and got back up, every time the world told her she didn't belong, and she responded with action. That late afternoon, as golden lights began to bathe the city, tension buzzed like a taut wire at the top floor of Reynolds Tower, headquarters of Wells Tech Capital. Inside the soundproofed boardroom, soft lighting reflected off the floor-to-ceiling windows, showcasing the Manhattan skyline. Dominic Wells stood at the head of a long table, surrounded by some of the sharpest minds in the country: lawyers, corporate takeover strategists, media consultants, and brand advisors. Amara sat beside him, her gaze cold and composed. No longer the woman who had been humiliated that morning, she now resembled a queen about to enter battle. And Dominic, her husband, was the general who would never let anyone insult his wife without consequence. "We begin," Dominic said, his voice deep and resolute. He placed a red-marked confidential dossier on the table. The cover read, "Counter-Strike Plan, Operation Aurora." Victoria Chase, Wells Tech's chief legal officer, was the first to speak. Celestia Lux is owned by Ascendant Holdings, a luxury conglomerate with 7 sub-brands, currently valued at $4.1 billion US. But they're in a vulnerable position. Stock dropped 9.8% last quarter. Pressure from investors is mounting, and there are internal allegations of discriminatory practices. Dominic gave a short nod. "We're going to make that pressure explode." He turned to the financial experts seated across the table. "In the next 12 hours, begin discreetly acquiring Ascendant Holdings shares through our shell funds. Make sure they don't know who's behind it." One analyst looked up, brow furrowed. "You're planning to take control of the entire group." "Mr. Wells, that will require hundreds of millions." Dominic smiled calmly, unshaken. "I sold 3% of my Wells Tech holdings last week. Use that money. This isn't a cost. This is an investment in justice." Victoria continued, her tone sharper now. "Legally, I've compiled testimony from witnesses, CCTV footage from the store, deleted reviews from black customers, and statements from former Celestia Lux employees. What happened to Amara won't be dismissed as a minor incident. It will become the spark that ignites a national investigation into corporate ethics." She placed a thick folder on the table. "This is a list of managers previously accused, but covered up internally. Stephen Cross is just the latest name." At the end of the table, a brand strategist smiled slyly. "And when Ascendant Holdings falls, we'll be ready to launch the new brand, Aurora Atelier. Luxury for all, distinct in identity, but uncompromising in excellence." As the team took notes and began to leave the room, Dominic rose. His eyes swept the table with grave intensity. "Tomorrow they'll wake up to a world they no longer control, and we'll show them what real power looks like, the kind that doesn't come from skin color, but from justice and human dignity." Operation Aurora had begun. And the elite world of Celestia Lux, once thought untouchable, had just suffered its first crack. As night fell over New York City, the blinking lights of upscale shopping streets couldn't begin to reflect what was unfolding behind the curtain of global finance. A world where power isn't flaunted with golden spotlights, but wielded through code strings, encrypted calls, and covert trades that can shift entire economies overnight. 12:01 a.m. In 3 war rooms across 3 time zones, New York, London, and Singapore, Dominic Wells' silent army took position. They wore no uniforms. They held no rank. Just men and women in dark suits, with calm expressions, fingers on encrypted laptops, eyes locked onto ever-shifting digital tickers. They were M&A specialists, masters of mergers and acquisitions. Not celebrities, but relentlessly sought after by billion-dollar empires. And tonight they had one singular mission: to acquire Ascendant Holdings completely undetected, until it was far too late to fight back. In a sealed command room at Wells Tech Capital headquarters, Victoria Chase, the chief legal officer, orchestrated the operation like a wartime general. Divide the equity acquisition under the names of 3 shell companies. No single buy exceeds 3%. Split the orders evenly across 18 funds. Stagger the trades. We can't afford to trigger any pattern recognition alerts on the exchanges. In London, a trust fund analytics team was executing coordinated purchases via seemingly unrelated investment firms. In Singapore, a tech division had built a fully automated system to process hundreds of microtransactions across global stock exchanges. While the media still buzzed over the fall fashion shows, Dominic Wells and his team were launching a financial coup. Bloodless, gunless, but lethally effective. At 3:15 a.m., a specialist at the New York Coordination Center looked up, eyes still fixed to the screen. "We've secured 51.2% of Ascendant Holdings voting shares." Victoria allowed herself the faintest smile. Then, as of sunrise, Celestia Lux and all 6 sister brands belong to us. In the dim glow of monitors, only calm, razor-focused faces remained. No champagne, no high fives. Because they all knew the real battle wouldn't begin until the sun came up. 8 a.m., 3 hours before the judgment. In the Wells penthouse, Dominic sat quietly, sipping his espresso. From the dressing room, Amara emerged in a custom-tailored ivory-white suit, elegant, commanding. She didn't need to say a word. Dominic rose, buttoned his jacket. It's time. A new day had begun, and Celestia Lux had no idea that today would be their last day as rulers of the luxury world. 10 a.m., Fifth Avenue, Manhattan. Morning sunlight filtered through the tall glass windows of Celestia Lux, casting golden reflections across the pristine white marble floors. Everything appeared to be just another ordinary day, steeped in luxury, coldness, and a confidence that bordered on arrogance. Stephen Cross, executive manager of the flagship branch, was adjusting his cufflinks in the mirror, preparing for what he called another busy morning with the elite class. He had just stepped out of his private office when a deep, thunderous sound rolled in from the street, a sound every car enthusiast recognizes instantly. The V12 engine of a Rolls-Royce Phantom. 1, then 2, then 3, then 4. 4 Rolls-Royce Phantom Black Badge editions pulled up in perfect formation outside Celestia Lux. All were identical, metallic anthracite grey, gleaming chrome trim, with fiery orange interiors glowing through the windows. The entire block on Fifth Avenue froze. Sales associates, security guards, passers-by, all turned to look at the motorcade as if royalty had arrived. The first door opened. Amara Wells stepped out. She was no longer the woman in a simple sweater who had been shoved out the door the day before. Today she embodied unquestionable power and poise. An ivory jumpsuit hugged her statuesque frame, her hair elegantly swept up, red-bottomed heels clicking rhythmically on the sidewalk. No handbag, no flashy accessories, just a razor-sharp gaze and an aura of absolute composure. The second car door opened. Dominic Wells appeared. A midnight blue suit tailored to perfection, a deep silk tie, and the unmistakable silhouette of a limited edition Richard Mille watch on his wrist. Not to flaunt wealth, but because that's the quiet confidence of a man who holds the reins of American tech. Behind them followed Victoria Chase, chief legal counsel, and 8 senior executives from Wells Tech Capital and its financial allies. No one smiled, no greetings were exchanged. They weren't here to shop. They were here to take over. Stephen Cross had rushed outside by now. His eyes locked on Amara, his face briefly stunned, before turning pale as paper. "Good morning, ma'am. Please excuse us. We're not officially open yet." Dominic said nothing. He simply turned to Victoria. She nodded, pulled out a color-printed document, and handed it to Stephen. "Legal confirmation of our controlling stake, 58% of Ascendant Holdings voting shares, signed at 4:47 this morning. Which means, as of this moment, you are no longer the manager of this location." The air turned thick with tension. Employees froze mid-task. Shoppers held their breath. Security tightened their grip on their radios. In just a few seconds, an empire built on pride began to unravel. Right at the front door, under the watchful eyes of the world. Dominic turned to Amara, gently offering his hand. "Would you like to walk in first, or shall I?" Amara gripped her husband's hand. Her voice was soft as a breeze, but sharp as a blade. "This time, I'm not stepping in to shop. I'm stepping in to clean up the mess they've been calling luxury service." The sound of Amara's heels echoed on the cold marble steps. The glass doors of Celestia Lux slid open. And history officially turned a page. The atmosphere inside Celestia Lux was now thick, charged like static in the air. Every gaze was fixed on the couple who had just stepped through the automatic glass doors. The same doors where, just yesterday, that woman had been dragged out like a thief. Amara Wells walked in first, back straight, eyes sharp. Every step she took was a silent declaration. "I'm back, and this time I'm in charge." Right behind her stood Dominic Wells, tall, composed. He didn't need to say a word. His mere presence was enough to make every staff member realize one mistake had just become the system's worst nightmare. At the back, Stephen Cross still held the stack of papers in his hands like some foreign object. His eyes darted across the pages. New executive authorization, controlling shares, immediate suspension from duty. Sweat began to bead on his forehead. His throat was parched. Is this real?" he stammered, trying to maintain composure, but his hands were visibly trembling. Victoria Chase, the chief legal officer in a grey suit and a gaze as cold as steel, didn't blink. "We completed all transactions at 4:47 a.m. Copies of the contracts, bank confirmations, and notices to the stock exchange have all been sent. As of this moment, you no longer hold any authority at Celestia Lux." The entire store fell into stunned silence. The staff who had turned their backs on Amara just yesterday now stood frozen, half wishing they could disappear, half refusing to believe what they were seeing. A young female employee, the same girl who had ignored Amara while she was being dragged away, quietly pulled out her phone, checked, and her face went pale as she read the breaking news. Ascendant Holdings acquired. Dominic Wells officially takes over. Lance Miller, the security guard who had roughly thrown Amara out the day before, now stood stiffly by the makeup counter. When Amara's eyes swept over him, he instinctively stepped back. I was just following orders," he muttered, but no one was listening anymore. Dominic stepped forward. His voice was deep and steady, cutting through the room. I'm not here to remind you what you did to my wife. I'm here to announce, as of this moment, Celestia Lux is finished, and Aurora Atelier begins. A soft click echoed. Victoria had activated a mini projector already set up. A screen lit up in the middle of the store, displaying footage from the day before. Stephen Cross publicly humiliating Amara. Lance Miller dragging her out. Customers filming it, sharing the videos online with the hashtag #, Justice for Amara. Eyes that once looked down on her, now filled with dread, shame and regret. Amara scanned each face, those who had ignored her, dismissed her, or even smirked while she was being humiliated. Then she stopped. Calmly, clearly. I don't need your apologies. I just need you to understand. Power doesn't come from expensive suits or shiny business cards. It comes from how you treat those who have nothing. At that moment, Dominic turned to Stephen Cross, his face now ghostly pale, eyes pleading. You're fired, effective immediately. Pack your belongings and leave. As a former discriminatory manager. Two security officers stepped forward from the back, not the old guards, but WellsTech's private security team. Stephen tried to shout out a defense, but Dominic simply gave a quiet nod. And just like that, the man who once thought he was king of Celestia Lux was escorted out like a criminal, under the silent gaze of his own subordinates. All of it happened in just 10 minutes. 10 minutes, enough to bring down an arrogant empire, and to ignite the birth of a new symbol of justice. A heavy silence hung over Celestia Lux after Stephen Cross was escorted out. All remaining employees huddled near the counters, their eyes filled with worry and fear. Not a single word was spoken. Dominic Wells slowly stepped onto the central display platform, the very spot once reserved for Celestia Lux's most luxurious items. He unbuttoned his suit jacket, calmly scanning the bowed heads in front of him. Then he spoke, his voice low but echoing like a funeral bell. You're proud of Celestia Lux, aren't you? A place reserved for the elite. A place where you believed you had the right to judge who was worthy of walking through these doors, and who wasn't. He paused, his piercing gaze sweeping across the room, stripping every employee bare. You were wrong. True luxury is not about exclusion. It's not about humiliating customers with your stares and assumptions. True luxury is about inclusion. It's about how you make anyone who walks in here feel seen, valued, and respected. At that moment, Amara Wells stepped forward to stand beside her husband. Her pristine white blazer stood in stark contrast to the dark past that had just been exposed. She opened the brown leather envelope Victoria Chase had been holding and pulled out the official notice. As of 12 p.m. today, the entire Celestia Lux system will shut down indefinitely. All employees will be subject to a reassessment process before being considered for rehire under the new brand, Aurora Atelier. Shock rippled through the store. One female employee burst into sobs. Another collapsed into a chair, face drained of all color. A few who had once strutted around with pride now scrambled to bow to plead, "Please give me another chance. I didn't know what happened yesterday. I was just following the manager's orders." But Dominic merely shook his head coldly. He turned to Victoria Chase and gave a nod. She stepped forward with the microphone in hand. We've reviewed the security footage. We've watched every glance, every smirk, every act of disrespect. A list of those invited for re-interview has already been prepared. As for the rest, you will receive severance packages, along with our best wishes. The air became stifling, almost suffocating. Those who had shown prejudice the day before were now lining up to receive their termination envelopes. One by one, no excuses accepted. Amara stood silently, her face composed, not out of vengeance, but because justice must carry weight. And at that very moment, Dominic delivered the final blow. Celestia Lux will cease to exist. Aurora Atelier will rise in its place, and it will be a place where no one, no matter how rich or poor, no matter their skin color or background, will ever be treated with contempt. The first clap echoed through the room, then another, then a group of newer employees, those who had once watched helplessly, now erupted with applause. The sound of clapping filled the entire space like a bell tolling the end of a decaying empire and heralding the dawn of a new era. At exactly noon, the grand glass panels of Celestia Lux began to lower. The sunlight from outside was shut out, casting the opulent interior into a dim, muted shadow. But inside, another kind of light had just been ignited, the light of truth. Dominic Wells stepped forward, with Amara Wells standing beside him. Victoria Chase, the chief legal officer, had everything ready. A massive LED screen had been installed in the center of the main hall, replacing the space once used to display the store's most exclusive products. Dominic's voice rang out, clear and commanding, like a judge handing down a verdict. Today, before all remaining staff and executives of Ascendant Holdings, we declare this wasn't a single act of discrimination. It wasn't a one-time humiliation. It was a diseased system that has festered too long under the facade of luxury. And it will be exposed, here and now. Victoria gave the signal. The LED screen lit up. Clips from the store's security system spanning the past 3 months began to play. Footage of employees showing cold, dismissive behavior toward customers of color. Lance Miller, the security guard, quietly tailing a Latino customer throughout the store. Stephen Cross mocking an elderly Asian woman, telling her, "This isn't a place for window shopping." There were no words left to excuse it. Murmurs of horror spread through the employees. Some hung their heads in shame. Others flushed red, knowing their reckoning had come. And then, the fatal blow. A side door opened. 3 actual victims stepped in. Customers who had once been humiliated by Celestia Lux, now ready to confront them face to face. Judge Ruth Delacroix, a highly respected New York State judge, once shouted out of the store just for wearing a plain coat. Miguel Herrera, a successful young entrepreneur, trailed by security solely because of his brown skin. Priya Mehra, an internationally awarded scientist, denied service simply because she didn't fit the store's aesthetic. Judge Ruth stepped forward. Her face held no anger, only the resolute calm of justice. You forgot that luxury isn't measured by price tags. It's measured by how you treat people. Today, you face the consequences of your own choices. Miguel and Priya followed. They recounted the shame, the looks of disdain, the isolation they endured, not because they did anything wrong, but simply because they didn't look like the ideal customer in Celestia Lux's eyes. Soft sobbing began among the employees. Some covered their faces, crying. Dominic stood silently, listening. Then, once the testimonies were done, he stepped forward, voice calm but firm. We will rebuild from these ashes, not to take revenge, but to make a statement. Discrimination will have no place in any organization bearing our name. Aurora Atelier will rise from the very ground where my wife was humiliated, and it will be a place where every human being is honored for who they are. Victoria Chase stepped up and began distributing official termination notices to each individual involved. There were no negotiations, no excuses, only a cold, necessary justice. Applause broke out, first from the newly recruited staff, then from the witnesses, and finally from those who had once been mistreated. The applause swelled, like a final declaration marking the fall of a prejudiced empire, and the ringing in of a new era, where no one would ever fear a judgmental stare just for walking through the door. Just 72 hours after the explosive public courtroom reckoning, the Celestia Lux sign, once a symbol of elitist opulence, was taken down. The massive glass panel crashed to the ground under the midday sun, shattering like a burial rite for a rotting past. Dominic Wells and Amara Wells' team wasted not a single second. They worked around the clock, dismantling, refurbishing, breathing new life into every marble tile, every crystal chandelier that had once grown too accustomed to arrogance. 3 new words gradually appeared, glowing brightly like a declaration in the heart of Fifth Avenue. Aurora Atelier, and beneath it, etched with refined precision, luxury for all. On opening day, Fifth Avenue was packed. The media swarmed. Fashion bloggers, reporters, and even bystanders who had witnessed Amara's humiliation days earlier all gathered. Aurora Atelier was unlike any luxury brand before it. No more sealed doors or judgmental stares. No more hidden price tags guarded like state secrets. No more subtle discrimination woven into the service. Everyone was welcomed like a VIP. Elderly and young, white and people of color, immigrants, business people, students. At Aurora Atelier, everyone received the same warm smile, the same deep respect. The new staff, diverse in ethnicity, age, and appearance, had all undergone a special training program personally led by Amara Wells. We're not just selling products, we're delivering the feeling of being seen, heard, and valued. And it didn't stop there. Aurora Atelier launched the Open Luxury Initiative, scholarships for young designers from underrepresented communities, free display space for startup brands who couldn't afford expensive retail locations, a global campaign titled Elegance Knows No Color. In his grand opening speech, Dominic Wells declared, "Aurora Atelier is not just a brand. We are a challenge to the entire luxury industry. Change to honor every human being, or be buried by your own past." Amara Wells, in a pristine white jumpsuit, stood before hundreds of camera lenses, beaming with a radiant smile. She didn't seek revenge. She had changed the entire game. From the ashes of Celestia Luxe, a new era was born. An era where luxury truly belongs to everyone. Just 3 months after Aurora Atelier's grand opening, a quiet earthquake began rippling through the world of high fashion. Traditional luxury brands, from Paris, Milan, and New York to Tokyo, started to tremble. Aurora Atelier's performance exceeded every forecast, plus 42% growth in just the first quarter, a 68% increase in customers of color. 5-star service ratings dominated every platform, from Google reviews to Vogue magazine. International media heaped on the praise. Aurora Atelier is redefining 21st century luxury, the New York Times. When respect becomes the most valuable product. Forbes, a humanistic revolution in the luxury industry. Vogue, the biggest shock struck the old giants. Hermont, Valseria, Étoile de Paris, Moncler. Brands that once assumed customers had to be worthy just to step through their doors now faced a furious wave of boycotts. Social media flooded with hashtags luxury for all, dignity in every transaction, no more discrimination. The leadership teams of these luxury conglomerates called emergency meetings. Étoile de Paris announced a new staff training program to combat unconscious bias. Hermont pledged to diversify hiring at every level, from leadership down. Valseria unveiled a no ask, no judge, no prejudice customer service policy. But it was too late. Aurora Atelier had already become the symbol of a new era. An era where the value of a human being stood equal to the value of the products they purchased. In an interview with CNN, Amara Wells answered calmly, "We didn't create a movement. We simply did what should have been the standard from the very beginning. Treat every customer like a human being. And when you offer respect, they give you loyalty. Loyalty that no amount of money can buy." Brick by brick, the old luxury world, once ruled by privilege and social stratification, began to crack under the pressure for change. No one could afford to ignore the tidal wave named Aurora Atelier anymore. A quiet revolution, unstoppable and irreversible, had begun. Amara Wells knew that victory couldn't stop at commercial success. If they only changed the brand without changing the people, it would simply be a fresh coat of paint over old cracks. From day one, she personally led Aurora Atelier's global staff training program, a program called Respect is the Real Luxury. The headquarters auditorium shone brightly under the lights, yet the atmosphere was hushed. Hundreds of employees, from sales associates to branch managers to regional directors, sat attentively, focused on the small woman stepping up to the podium. Amara wore no ostentatious designer clothes. She chose a simple, pristine white suit, her hair neatly tied up, her eyes sharp yet warmly inviting. She didn't start with a speech. She started with a question. Have any of you ever felt judged just by your appearance? Dozens of hands quietly went up. The room sank into a heavy, collective silence, like a shared wound exposed under the light. Amara nodded gently. Then you understand. Every glance, every smile, every greeting we give can either be an invitation into a new world or a slammed door in someone's face. We are not selling products. We are offering recognition, respect, and trust. And if we do not offer it with all our hearts, then no matter how expensive the product is, it's meaningless. Amara's training program was unlike anything the luxury retail world had ever seen. Real-world scenario workshops. Employees role-played as customers from diverse backgrounds, forcing them to confront their own unconscious biases. Listen before you serve classes, training not just in sales techniques, but in seeing and honoring the life stories behind every customer. Personal commitment. Each employee signed a respect pledge, not out of obligation, but out of pride in being part of Aurora Atelier. 6 months later, the results exceeded all expectations. Complaints about service attitude dropped by 93%. Repeat customer rates doubled. Aurora Atelier was ranked the #1 dream workplace in luxury retail by Forbes. In an internal leadership meeting, Aurora Atelier's CEO reported, "Amara didn't just change how we sell. She changed how we see people. And because of that, customers have chosen us with their hearts, not just their wallets." One day, after the final training session for a new staff cohort, a young employee, someone who had once been turned away from many stores because of her simple appearance, tearfully asked Amara, "Miss Wells? Here. Is it really true that everyone is welcome?" Amara smiled warmly, without hesitation. "Not only are you welcome, here you will shine." Amara Wells' living legacy was not merely the birth of a new empire in the luxury world. It was the thousands of people who, each day, stepped into the world believing they deserved to be respected, loved, and to succeed. In a dim corner of the city, where tired neon lights flickered over cracked sidewalks, Stephen Cross, the man who once stood proudly atop the heights of Celestia Luxe, now hunched inside a cheap red vest, the uniform of a discount chain called Budget Mart. His face was gaunt, his hair disheveled, his heavy steps dragging across the faded plastic flooring. The crooked name tag on his chest read, "Stephen, sales trainee." No more glittering marble lobbies, no more sweet greetings from subordinates, no more VIP clients hanging on to his every word. All that remained were the weary clatter of cash registers, the sharp, impatient questions from hurried customers, the curt, barking orders from a supermarket manager half his age. One afternoon, while he was stacking clearance items, Stephen flinched at the sound of giggling behind him. Two teenagers, their oversized hoodies slouching over their frames, were secretly filming him with their phones. One laughed loudly. "Hey, isn't that the guy who used to be the manager at Celestia Luxe? The racist one who got kicked out?" Stephen pretended not to hear, bowing his head lower, his face burning red. but the whispers of ridicule around him continued to sting. Karma's real. Used to be so high and mighty, now selling stuff at 80% off. Everyone's day comes sooner or later. That night, in a cramped, dingy room barely large enough for a single bed and a wobbly wooden table, Stephen sat silently before the cracked screen of his old phone. The headlines flashed, Aurora Atelier crowned the leading luxury brand for social justice. Amara Wells, the woman who changed the history of global luxury. For a fleeting moment, Stephen reached out and touched the screen. Amara Wells's radiant smile shining back at him. His eyes grew heavy. No more hatred, no more arrogance, only the bitter weight of a regret that came too late. Stephen Cross, the man who once thought himself the gatekeeper of who deserved to enter the world of luxury, was now the one shut out from it. Every door slammed in his face without warning. A lesson that needed no teacher. A sentence that needed no pronouncement. An ending that deserved no pity. On an autumn afternoon, golden sunlight poured down the boulevard where Aurora Atelier stood. The clear glass facade reflected the brilliant blue sky, and inside, the entire space was filled with warm light and the soft, gentle notes of music. A young girl stood in front of the door, a second-hand coat with frayed hems, sneakers faded by time, a small backpack clutched tightly to her chest like a fragile shield. Her name was Lena Ramirez Dash, the daughter of an immigrant worker, fresh off her shift at a small diner, nurturing her dream of becoming a fashion designer through sketches on torn scraps of paper. Lena looked up at the sign, Aurora Atelier, luxury for all. A simple slogan, but to her it felt like a gentle invitation. Here you will not be judged. Here you will be seen. She took a deep breath and pushed open the door. No looks of disdain, no security guard trailing her every step, no whispers behind her back. Instead, a warm smile from a staff member and a sincere welcome. Hi there, we're so happy you're here. Would you like me to show you some of our new collections? Lena nearly burst into tears from the emotion. She wandered wide-eyed through the displays. Every product sparkled, but without feeling out of reach. Every price tag was openly displayed. No secretive walls meant to intimidate. The staff, diverse in race, body shape, and language, all breathed the same spirit. Welcome. In a small corner, Lena noticed a sign, Aurora Young Designers Scholarship. If you have a dream, we have the space for you to shine. Amara Wells, the woman who had transformed an entire industry, was there that day too. Wearing a simple, elegant white suit, Amara quietly observed Lena from afar, not with judgment, but with recognition, seeing a reflection of her younger self in Lena's hesitant figure. Amara approached, smiling warmly. You love fashion, don't you? Lena nodded shyly, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Amara gently placed a registration form in her hands. Give it a try. You deserve a chance. Here, we don't look at your wallet. Here, we look at your dreams. In that moment, the circle of hope closed, only to open a new one. A new generation stepped through the doors of Aurora Atelier, without fear, without shame, without the terror of being rejected because of where they came from. Aurora Atelier didn't just sell luxury goods. It sold hope. It offered opportunity. It turned dreams into reality, ending one chapter and opening a new era. Because luxury is not a privilege for the few. Luxury is a light for all who dare to reach for it. In a world where light was often reserved for a select few, Amara Wells lit a torch and fiercely carried it into the hands of everyone. From a public humiliation to a silent revolution. From a door slammed in her face to a city where every door now stands open. Aurora Atelier is not just a brand. It is a declaration. You don't have to prove you deserve respect. You deserve it. simply because you exist. Somewhere in the world, a young girl is still stepping into that light, carrying hope, faith, and dreams once buried in dust. And with every step she takes, Amara Wells, and others like her, quietly open yet another door. Luxury is no longer a privilege. Luxury has become a legacy of justice, compassion, and unapologetic pride. If you believe that even a small action can change the world, let that light begin with you. Like, subscribe, and share this story, because the world needs more Auroras now more than ever. See you on the next journey.